All right. Well, welcome everybody. This is Bridget at Tanglewood Nature Center, and we are here for our weekly noon live show. We've moved to noon because we are crossing our fingers and hopefully we're getting much closer to reopening the Nature Center. We are phase 4, as you may have heard, so it's a couple more weeks yet. But as we start planning for reopening and hopefully planning for our summer programming, we've been moving our staff schedules around. So those of you who have been loyal friends and followers of the 3 p.m. lives on Wednesday, well, now they're at noon, and we do think we're going to keep going with these for the summer. So if you have any questions or ideas or favorite animal friends that we haven't focused on yet, definitely drop those in the comments. If we're going to keep doing this party all summer long, we want to celebrate and share with you guys, not just what we think is fun. Although I'm having a good time. I have filled our bird feeders. Noon is not usually widely considered the best time to go bird watching, so I stacked the odds in my favor and brought a bird with me. So Hank and I are going to watch the bird feeders. Oh, we got a red-winged blackbird hanging out here. And between his sharp hawk eyes and my glasses augmented frail human eyes, hopefully we'll see some cool stuff. All right. So we're perched up here on the decks. We've got a good view of the bird feeders. That red-winged blackbird is really imaginatively named. It is a black bird with red bars on the wings. That one is a male. The males are pretty flashy. They got to posture, pose, and impress the females. The females, I often tell kids on school field trips and visitors, they're a little more subtle. They're trying to blend in. They're kind of ninjas or masters of camouflage. So the females there are usually going to be kind of a stripy mottled brown, which is fantastic camouflage for them because it helps them blend in with the reeds and the cattails in which they make their nests. The cattails are such a cool habitat for red-winged blackbirds. It really gives them a beautiful little homestead site above the water level so that their babies and their eggs don't get cold and wet, but below the tops of the cattails. And if you've ever seen the cattails around our pond or other ponds, they are thick. They're dense. So it looks impenetrable if you are a predator like this gentleman flying above the cattails. You're not going to see the nest snuggled in there about halfway up a cattail stalk. You're not going to see the lady protecting her eggs because she is camouflaged beautifully. And you're not even going to see the eggs because the eggs of the red-winged blackbirds are also stripy. They're kind of white with stripy mottled speckies. It looks a lot like they've been pooped on. So if you're doing the aerial view of a red-winged blackbird nest, it looks like an empty nest full of old poops from last year. So if you're a predator like Hank, that just doesn't look very appealing. You're going to move on and continue hunting someplace else. All right, so that was our first visitor. We'll see who else comes out. We can talk a little bit about Hank while we wait for our next birds. More birds! Oh, they're beautiful. They're not going to stay. All right, maybe they'll come back and we'll talk about them more when they hang out. I'm not sure how great the view is from my phone, but the flashier birds like the redwings, if we see like a cardinal or a goldfinch, those will pop and we can talk about them when you can actually see them. All right. Back to this handsome stud muffin of a bird. That's the scientific term for them, obviously. Hank is a red-tailed hawk. If we examine, he's like, where are you going? Where are you going with that camera? If we examine his tail, you can see it is a really beautiful red color. Red like a red head, or red like a sunset sometimes. I tell kids, it's not ketchup red. It's not cardinal red. But when these birds are soaring overhead, when they spread out their wings and they take off and they're up in the sky and they're backlit by the sun, it's red like a sunset, and it's just stunning to see the light come through those beautiful fanned tails. These guys are probably one of the most common hawks around the country, and also certainly in our area. They're very easy to find, and they're such a great first bird to get you hooked on bird watching. They are often easy to find even for bored kids on road trips. So if you're sick of playing the license plate game, you can start counting birds of prey, like these hawks, who are frequently found sitting on telephone poles or trees alongside highways and roads. These red-tailed hawks actually have done really well with a lot of human development. If you're familiar with DDT, Rachel Carson's Silent Spring, and some of the pesticides back in the 50s that were really bad for many of our birds, peregrine falcons, for example, their numbers plummeted. Red-tails, oddly, did not suffer as much from those chemicals. Their populations have remained really steady for many decades, and with human clearing, adding more roads, building more developments, giving them more of that edge habitat that you can kind of see in the background here, combinations of field and forest, especially where they meet. Those are perfect for our red-tailed hawks. They just love those edge habitats, or ecotones if you're fancy. There's your good vocab word for the day. So these hawks have done great. Their populations have grown over the past several decades. They're one of the most populous hawks in North America, very frequently seen in our area. And I really do recommend counting red-tailed hawks as you drive around. My husband and I play that game all the time, and we have a notepad in our car. And on a drive to Boston last year, we saw north of 150 red-tailed hawks on that drive. So keep your eyes peeled. They're stunning, and they really do love those clearings at the edge of a open space and a dense forest space. So I see Jessica Pack asked a great question. Why is it there are so many of them sitting in the highway median? So used to seeing them roosting versus up on the ground. That's a fantastic question. Great observation. They really do love that field or flat area meets forest. That's a really rich place for them to find their prey. They can sit on perches, tree branches at the edge of that clearing. They feel sheltered and safe. They're secure, and they can just scan the ground ceaselessly for their next meal. Why they hang out in the median is like a slightly... it's an accurate answer, but it's a slightly gross answer. These hawks are not above eating carrion or dead meat, and if you've ever driven on a highway, you'll find your fair share of roadkill along the way, either in the median or at the edge of the road. And especially young hawks, first-year hawks, second-year hawks, they're not necessarily practiced hunters yet. They're maybe not great. Their catch and kill rate may not be as high as a more successful mature adult bird. So a lot of them kind of regard roads and highways as buffets, where you don't have to move very fast and your dinner isn't going to move very fast, so you can just go get it when you're ready. You'll also see them a lot on roads that are salted because, in our area, if the road crews, when it snows, are using salt, that's a really attractive mineral to rodents. So you'll find chipmunks and squirrels and mice often cruising the edge of the road looking for minerals in winter. And they're all perfect, delicious snacks for Hank and his brethren. So yeah, a lot of those young birds like to be on roads because it's easy pickings. And hunting is dangerous for them. I mean, it's really hard work. I sure could not catch a pigeon out of the air. It would not matter how much time you gave me to practice, I could not do it. And a lot of young birds, it really does take a lot of effort and a lot of practice for them to become passable to good hunters. These guys can see ultraviolet light, which is a very cool power or ability of theirs. And ultraviolet light is often reflected from rodent urine. So they can be perched up in a tree or soaring overhead if they catch a nice thermal, and they can see the urine droplets or trails that mice have left as they scurry about on the ground. It's almost like the ability to see, past time. They can see where that animal has gone and where it might be likely to go next. Or if they see a lot of rodent trails, they know it's a very rich area for hunting. So that ability to see the light, the ultraviolet light reflected from the rodent urine, gives them a lot of information about where to hunt next. But there's always a risk that you take when you're hunting. Most of the time, the prey gets away. A bird this big, he's They can get up to 3 pounds. The males are usually a little smaller than the females. I don't know off the top of my head how much Hank weighs. You're not going to tell me either. That's a rude question to ask. I'm sorry. I apologize. But they have to catch several prey animals a day. Because they may not get one every single day. They don't get a standard steady meal of one squirrel a day. Sometimes you have really good days and sometimes you have really bad days and you end up fasting. They'll take any number of prey animals. They're not super picky, the red-tailed hawks. They like rodents. We've been talking about rodents a bit so far today. They'll also eat other birds. They'll catch and eat smaller birds of prey even, which is pretty impressive. Many of the birds at the feeder he would widely regard as a snack. They'll also eat amphibians, frogs, toads. They'll even eat snakes. Hank has caught a garter snake or two in his day that made the unwise choice to wander into his house at Tanglewood. Yeah. Oh, you're so handsome. Oh, you're so handsome. He's showing off his wings for you guys. He believes he's still a very ferocious hunter. So Hank lives with us at Tanglewood because he was injured in the wild, probably on one of those really risky hunting trips as a young bird where he was not successful at getting his snack and he wasn't very successful at avoiding injury. So he has an old injury to one of his wings. It doesn't hurt him anymore. Let me see if I can get him some better lit so you can check him out there instead of the backlighting. It doesn't hurt him anymore. He is pretty active and pretty mobile, as you saw with that nice little stretch of his wings there. So he actually is able to fly short distances. He can probably go up to about 30 feet at a go. And one of our great volunteers from a few years ago, Chris, helped us develop a training regimen so that we could train Hank to do short flights of about 30 feet from a glove like I'm wearing, I can talk about that in a second, to a sawhorse. And then he would get a little snack or reward for doing that short flight or long jump. But that's really about as far as he can go. He can't fly well enough to hunt on his own anymore. And because of the way that his wing was injured, he isn't really able to use that wing fully. He can't flap very vigorously, and he can't quite attain height on his own. So if I were to launch him from the deck down, he could coast pretty beautifully. He could probably make it down to the bench and perch there and then threaten some more birds. But he wouldn't be able to ever come back up here because he isn't able to get that kind of height anymore. That's just the way that his wing is broken. But it doesn't hurt. He's got fun games to play with us, and we bring his dinner to him every day. So he's living the good life. All right. So I'm looking to see if anybody has questions. Liz Stone, I don't know much about birds. You do now. Ask me any questions you can think of and we can kind of fill you in. I mentioned the glove that I'm wearing. This is a nice leather glove because of those beautiful talons. And he is wearing little leather anklets and jesses. Those are the little bracelet-y looking things there. And they are clipped to my glove. So my poor bird with his mostly functional one wing, if he were to lose his balance or be scared or startled, if he took off, tried to flop, he would not be able to get hurt. I would catch him before he hit the ground. I would catch him before he were exposed to any danger because of this very short leash is protecting him from getting harmed. And the anklets and jesses don't bother them at all. They're just, oh, we're getting sassed by someone in that tree. Who is it? I don't know if you guys can hear it over the wind. Ooh. We might have some good visitors soon, Hank. We'll see if that friend comes out so we can actually see him. But yeah, his anklets and jesses don't bother him at all. They are just a way to keep him safe, and they're nice, lightweight, weatherproofed leather. Oh, we're watching some dragonflies go by. So that kind of raspy burry call is a warding call. That bird is not, the bird in the bush is not pleased to discover that there's a very large bird of prey overlooking the bird feeders today. I was hoping we might be kind of subtly hiding back here in the shadows. But they are onto us, Hank. They found us. So we'll look at Hank's beautiful eyes here for a second. You can see him contracting his pupils. He has a little bit of manual control over his eyes. You and I, if we walk into, as humans, if we walk into a sunny room, our pupils are going to get very tiny, restrict the amount of light that's coming in. And then if we walk into a dark basement, our pupils are going to get very huge so that they can get any tiny amount of light that's out there. But we don't have what I called manual control a second there. I don't have the ability to think, gosh, I'd like more light. I should open my pupils. But he does have the ability to play with those pupils so that he can focus on something in the distance and get just the correct amount of exposure or light so that he can focus on his prey item. Oh, you may have missed this. How old is Hank? Great question. Hank is a gentleman, a mature gentleman. He came to us from another nature center that had closed in New York. So he's been in captivity for almost his entire life, and he is, I believe, presumed at least 11 or 12 years old. If any of my coworkers want to drop in the comments if I'm wrong, or if you have a more accurate answer, definitely go for it. I'll look it up as soon as I have my hand back. But I have one hand under a hawk and one hand on a phone. But he's a mature bird. The oldest red tail that's ever been tagged in some of those bird studies, Cornell identified the oldest red tail hawk as 30 years old that they had been tracking over some migration periods with a band on its wrist. So they knew they were getting the same bird every single time. 30 years old. And that's a wild bird that is migrating, facing all the hardships of migration. Hank has a house with a roof on it, and his dinner comes to him every day, and he goes to the vet if he's feeling poorly. So we could probably expect to have him for, quite a few more years. He could reasonably be expected to hit 20. Our red-winged blackbird friend is back and yelling at us again. Nice little tail fanning behavior there. All right. What else do we want to share, Hank? Oh, so handsome. Our friend in the bush is still yelling at us. That bird is really upsetty spaghetti. We'll see if it comes out, if I can identify it. All right, other facts about red tails. Oh my, you're showing off again. Look at that beautiful wing. Oh, so I mentioned migration. These guys are kind of considered partial migrants. You will find red-tailed hawks in our area throughout all 4 seasons. So several of them will stick around. But some of them do choose to move a little further south, or they'll go to slightly balmier areas. So at Hawk Mountain in Pennsylvania, that's where they track a lot of the different birds migrating through the area. And they'll see huge kettles of hawks each fall. Now you're showing off. There we go. And these guys are observed every single year. The average number of hawks that they have found passing through Hawk Mountain over the last 67 years was 3,302. So that's the average. The average is over 3,000 red-tailed hawks pass through that site every single year. So they're a really robust population that definitely does really well in the Northeast. If you're a film buff, you may know. A lot of us who enjoy watching Westerns, you'll see a beautiful scene ahead of you with canyons and arroyos, and you look up, the camera looks up, and there's a beautiful bird soaring overhead, and usually you hear a scream. And that kind of is the iconic American West sound. Oftentimes, the camera is actually looking at an eagle or even a vulture sometimes, depending on what mood they're trying to set. That sound of scream is always a red-tailed hawk. These are really cinematic birds. That scream call that they make is just blood-curdling in the coolest possible way. So that ferocity that we associate with Westerns, that's all the work of this fine bird. But he's not all fierce and ferocious. These guys can actually be devoted mates to each other, and they can be quite attentive to their young as well. So red-tailed hawks are considered monogamous, which means that they tend to stick with the same partner each mating season, and they have been known to mate for life as well. So they'll return to the same partner the next year and the next year and the next year. They're also pretty loyal to their nesting sites. They'll come back to the same nest that they used the year before. So if you're lucky enough to find one nesting around you, definitely mark that down for yourself and check back the next year, because the same pair may return to raise more babies. They have a pretty fancy mating ritual. So it's not just monogamous, it's also romance. They do a very cool, he's gonna show off some more. Yeah, hi, sweetie. They have kind of an aerial dive, which is really flashy to impress each other. So the male will do a very steep stoop. He'll basically dive down out of the sky and then do a very quick U-turn and ascend, flap really far back up as well. And then sometimes, if the male and female have impressed each other enough, they will also grasp talons and do a bit of aerial work together as well. And they usually have between 1 and 5 eggs. Not all of them make it, of course. Life is tough for a baby bird, but both parents are pretty attentive. While the female is sitting on the nest, the male will bring food to her throughout to make sure that she's well taken care of. And then once the young have kind of hatched out of their eggs, both parents are very, very careful about bringing snacks for them. From Leah, does Hank have a mate? No, he does not. Because of Hank's injury, he would not be able to survive in the wild. So he wouldn't be able to access a female. He wouldn't be able to impress a female. He wouldn't be able to do those aerodynamic dives and rolls. He wouldn't be able to tend to a female redwing. He couldn't bring her snacks or care for her or the young. So he is never going to have a wild girlfriend, that's for sure. We just have the one red-tailed hawk right now, just Hank. There are definitely other institutions, other nature centers, zoos, botanical gardens, aquariums, that do have multiple red-tails. They're just a really cool bird, and they have great personalities, and so it's very possible to have multiple of them in the same enclosure. They just tend to get along. They have nice personalities. But so far, we don't have multiples. We just have Hank. And even if we were to get a female and they were to live together and be friends, tolerant to buddies, let's say, we would not be in any position to raise those eggs. The two birds in captivity, they wouldn't be able to teach those babies hunting skills or how to protect themselves, how to flee from danger, and none of us here at Tanglewood on staff are bird raisers. So that's unlikely. That's not going to happen for us. Maybe we'll find another beautiful redtail in need of a home one of these days, but for right now, he's living the bachelor life. He is spoiled absolutely rotten. If you can see Gail commenting in there, Gail's one of our fantastic volunteers who has been trained to work with the birds. And she and Hank have a really lovely relationship where they go on walks and he peeps at her and they recognize faces. So Hank knows who's coming to see him at any given day at work. And he's definitely got, his people, his friends. So he's got a really nice relationship with quite a few different human beings. Oh, is Hank friendly from Susie? Great question. That's okay. I'm going to collect my thoughts for a second. Susie, that is a wonderful question. Thank you so much for asking. Friendly is a very human word. That's a concept of friendliness, of being social and outgoing and liking to meet new people and caring about them. That's something that's really important to humans, and it's really important to animals that humans have domesticated. So when humans interact with animals, sometimes we choose animals based on how friendly they are. So that's how we've ended up with so many different kinds of dogs in the world. We have Dalmatians, and we have Huskies, and we have Beagles, and we have Chihuahuas, and all of those were made by humans choosing a friendly animal and then keeping the friendliest animal, and then of their children, the friendliest animal. And we have kind of built a lovely partnership with those animals because they're friendly. We've chosen them to be friendly. We've built and rewarded their friendliness. Hank is a wild animal. He is not domesticated, and people have not been breeding and selecting red-tailed hawks for friendliness. Out in the wilds, the hawks choose each other based on who is the healthiest, and perhaps for these hawks that do take care of each other when they raise their young, maybe they also reward and choose the other hawks that are loyal to each other, that are nice to each other. So I would say they are social and friendly and care about other red-tailed hawks, their mates and maybe their babies. They're not friendly to every red-tailed hawk, though. They have what's called territories, and they'll have basically their yard, if you want to think of it as their big backyard, and they patrol and they make sure that it's their yard and they don't have to share it with other hawks unless they want to. So they're not always friendly to other red-tailed hawks, but they can be friendly to some that they like very much. And then we get to the question of, is Hank friendly to me or to other humans at Tanglewood? I think he's very tolerant. I think he is pretty patient. He puts up with us taking him to visit schools and libraries, so he travels in cars, and he sits on my glove, and he doesn't fuss very much. He doesn't get too nervous most of the time. And Hank recognizes faces, so when volunteers like Gail or staff people like me go in to get him to go to work for the day, he peeps and he recognizes us. And he doesn't seem to mind. If I put my glove out, he will hop onto my glove. And that to me seems like a sign that he doesn't not like me, I guess. He's neutral to cool with me. Maybe because I give him snacks a lot. But I would never call a wild animal like a red-tailed hawk friendly. They're never going to be pets or friendly the way that our dogs and cats and horses can be. It's just, whoop, it's going to stretch his wings one more time. There we go. Handsome boy. They're not friendly because they to other species really that way. I hope that answers your question, but if you have any follow-up questions, definitely ask. I will respond to them. But I guess the short answer to Susie is I think they're friendly to their mates and their babies, but I would never in my life pet this bird. And I've worked with him for 6 years. All right. Oh, what kind of bird is he and how old will Hank get? Two great questions from Nicole and Jackson. He is a red-tailed hawk, and he is one of our ambassador birds at Tanglewood Nature Center. So he was born in the wild and injured in the wild, and he can't go back to the wild. So he's going to be taken care of by humans for the rest of his life. And how old will Hank get? The oldest red-tailed hawk on record was a 30-year-old bird in the wild. That's a really long life for a wild bird because living in the wild is so hard. I think in captivity he could easily hit 20, but we will see. He is a mature gentleman right now, so I believe he's around 12-ish. Maybe one of my coworkers will chime in the comments and let me know if I'm wrong. But he could easily hit 20 in captivity, where he is pampered. He doesn't have to face the wind or the snow by himself. His dinners are all given to him on a plate. It's a pretty good life. All right. You might notice he's opening his mouth a little bit here. It is warm today. That's why there's not that many hikers passing by outside. It's a little hot and humid. So he's kind of opening his mouth just to be, to pant a little bit, kind of not dissimilar to a dog. It just gets some more air going through there, helps him cool off a bit. You can see his tiny little pink tongue. That tongue is a pretty different shape than our human tongues, which is why he can't talk. But he can express himself with noises like peeps and screams. But he can't roll his tongue, and he can't speak English or Spanish. So his tongue's quite a different shape than ours. And I haven't caught it yet, but he keeps looking at me, so maybe we'll see it happen. You'll notice him blink. He has a nictitating membrane, which is basically a see-through eyelid. And sometimes when he blinks, you can see him shut that. The see-through eyelid is just such a cool adaptation because it allows him to protect his eyes from branches, scratchy pokey things, little rodent nails or a mouse fighting back. but he can still see through it. So it's extra protection, kind of like a windshield for his eyes when he's flying and trying to hunt his prey. Your tongue can curl too, Nicole. That's great. He is really intrigued by this phone. Got a lot of red wireless. Well, we lost the wireless for a second, but we're back. All right. Any other questions about Hank or some of our other birds out and about today? Oh, Hank is 16 years old. Thanks, Elaine, for doing the research on that one. Oh my gosh, 16. That's way better than 12. 16 years old. Sweet 16. Oh my gosh, we should make him a cake. We should get candles. I don't think he can blow candles. I don't think his mouth works that way. I don't think he can exhale forcefully enough to blow out a candle. So his human keepers might have to help him out a little bit with that one. But we could probably get him a treat. Oh, for Nicole, does he see himself in the phone? I don't think so. I'm using the back-facing camera, so I can kind of see him through the front of my phone. He's just looking at a weird black rectangle in front of the face. Oh, thanks, Maggie. All my coworkers chiming in here. You guys are the best. Woo, a rouse! Woo. So that behavior just there, where he ruffled up all his feathers and then shook it out, is called a rouse. It's kind of a relaxing move. So he's getting comfy. He's maybe a little warm because it's 80-something and both of us are toasty, but he's getting comfy and relaxed here. All right, any other questions? I'm trying to think if there's anything else really special that I should share about him. All right. Well, so I will add this just because I tend to get asked at programs what animals' scientific names are, and it's a struggle for me to remember because Latin is not my native language. But red-tailed hawks, like Hank, are Buteo, jamaicensis. So that's because the first Western or European scientists to find and identify these birds found them in Jamaica. They're really widespread across North and Central America. Now, of course, these birds have been here for thousands of years, so that's just the first European scientists to find them. All of our indigenous folks would be very, very familiar with these birds and have been for millennia. All right, cool. Well, this handsome bird is making me work for it. I'm going to have a very buff left arm. He's a pretty heavy bird. So I think I'm going to call it today. If you think of any more questions, don't hesitate to drop them in the comments. All of us at Tanglewood are happy to answer. But I'm going to put him down and give him a rest, and he can go eat his dinner, which is, at Tanglewood, always a beautiful, tasty, first frozen and then thawed, and then beautifully presented to him, a rat or a mouse. Yeah, delicious lunchtime. Thank you guys. Thank you so much for joining us today. Such good questions. I really look forward to seeing you all again at noon next week. And let us know if there's any animals you want to learn more about. All right. Bye from Hank and Bridget at Tanglewood. Come visit the trails.